Hi, everybody. Welcome back. In a time when there is a lot happening out there, I just want to say, for me at least, normal work has been a little bit of a salve. And so we are here for talking about your questions about work. And for those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work. And I'm here with Helen, who I don't want to tell other people quite how much I respect her as a new VC because I don't want the secret to get fully out just yet. But Helen started and runs, or co-founded and runs, a new VC firm called Phenomenal Ventures, which she can tell us more about. And before that, she was an operator at these brands that you just didn't know that there was this one person who had gone between many of them as an operator. So what we have Facebook, Dropbox, Quora. Was Quora on the list? AngelList, Plaid. I don't even know where the list starts and stops, but it's a long list. And so we want to bring the thorniest problems to our most experienced friends. And so this is a thorny problem for many people, which is like a lot of people are trying to build their brand professionally, build their reputation. And I hear this all the time from like solo entrepreneurs who are like, I don't really want to go tweeting all the time. That's not me. I'm shy. I'm an introvert. I don't want my face to be out there. And so the question is, if I want to build my awareness of myself as a professional, my brand, but I feel like I'm shy or introverted, how do I do it? And so thank you for giving us a perspective.
Oh, thanks so much for having me here. I'm a longtime fan, so it's an honor to be here. So I guess just to start, it's helpful to take a step back and realize that we often conflate the idea of having a strong brand with the idea of being popular generally. And whether you think about popularity as like,
wow, that's a good one.
Social media followers or being famous, being a household name. I think especially when you're starting from zero, thinking about that can be really daunting because then you might start comparing yourself to people who are actually like popular and famous, and it feels like very unattainable. And so, to realize a brand is simply just what a specific subset of people know you for. It's empowering to realize you actually have a lot of control over this. And so, a story that is helpful to bring up, something that I think about all the time. About 10 years ago, I worked at Dropbox, and at the time, and maybe still, a big competitor is Box. And Box's CEO, Aaron Levy, is like very active on Twitter. I follow him.
He is hilarious on the Twitter.
Yes,
or
exactly.
was when it was the Twitter.
That's right, X. And he offered like all these witty insights and had commentary about all sorts of things. And he was just such like a likable character. And I remember that some folks on the sales team would be like, so do you think Drew might want to, put himself out there and suggesting that maybe like that might help with awareness and make their sales conversations go easier when they're selling Dropbox for business to enterprises. And that just wasn't Drew. Like he's a technical guy. He's shy. He's an introvert. I think he's got like a big personality when you have him one-on-one, but like, he's not going to be somebody who's like tweeting all day. So he didn't do that. But what he did do was he really doubled down on the things that were authentically him. And so that was building a strong technical brand among a technical audience. And this was really useful for two big reasons. One, it really differentiated us from Box, right? So when like CIOs and CTOs thought about Dropbox, they thought about, it's founded by this very technical co-founding team. They have a really strong engineering culture. The other thing that it did was, it was very helpful. If you remember 10 years ago, I consider that almost like peak times in terms of the arms race for top engineers in the Valley. You didn't even need anything for them to do. You just
it may have helped in ways other than being about what the customers thought or the popularity of the CEO or whatever it was.
That's right. So it was very, very helpful in building a strong engineering culture, being the place where, a lot of really top engineers wanted to work. And so, how did Drew do that? He just made sure that every time he was, doing an interview, he was talking to somebody,
he would say, I'm an engineer from MIT.
Well, I mean, there's subtle ways to do that, right? You can tell the origin story for Dropbox, which is, he's riding a bus from school to New York, the Port Authority bus terminal, lost his USB stick. It's sort of like spawned the idea for Dropbox. And that does a couple things. It reminds people that he went to MIT, which is a top engineering school. He's telling a real story. He's being authentic to him. And, everything is very consistent. And so, he talked about his going through YC. He talked about his mentorship from Zuck.
Yeah, I remember him talking to me about playing World of Warcraft at one point. I was like, well, obviously.
Exactly. All these things are very consistent. And all of those things
are true. They have the benefit of being true.
Yes, they're true, they're authentic, and all of them combined, right? Like the combination of all of them, he's continuing to build his brand as a highly technical CEO running an elite product company.
So that's
Yeah.
one way to do it. So, but let me ask, so there are plenty of technical people who are not shy or introverted. I don't know how his personality interacted. Like you're talking about, what I heard you say there is that's a choice of message, where generic wide scale awareness may not be as valuable as a particular aspect of one's company or self that you want people to be aware of. I think there's also the question of methods, which is to say, okay, let's go back to Aaron. Aaron's like tweeting constantly. Twitter was big then. And a lot of people who are shy or introverted might think like, I don't want to be public on social media, although many introverts are actually quite public on social media, ironically, but they'll think, I don't want to go speak at conferences, for example. And so how do you think personality of a person, and it doesn't have to be a founder, it could just be a person working at a company or a solopreneur or whatever it is, interacts with the method of how they get awareness?
That's such a great question. And my answer is different now than it would have been, let's say 5 years ago, because
Respect.
I think that before COVID, before hybrid work, before work from home, if you were lucky enough to land at a company like Facebook and be an introvert and really good at your job, you didn't have to do anything, because all of these people around you, there'd be more and more people every day, because it was like a hyper growth company, and more people would know that you
Right.
were really good at what you did. Now, working from home, people are not watching me work, people aren't like organically sort of spreading that message. I think writing is more important than ever. So even if you are, so before I would have been like, there's many ways to do this. You don't have to tweet, you don't have to write a blog post. Now I would say, you might want to think about, if you're not a great writer, that's fine. Like
Substack or else.
People do podcasts.
People do This Is Not Advice.
People do This Is Not Advice, although I will say the video thing is terrifying. And so, I feel more strongly that everyone should write.
I would just say, this is where I get to interrupt you and say that one of the things about this format is the video is really just a bootloader to create the content, which long-term lives in written form on thisisnotadvice.work. So there are many, the purpose of this is not to have a video show. It is to create a pretext for generating the content that can be valuable to people in other forms. Sorry to interrupt you, but you were saying right. Right.
But not only just right, because you have to do it and commit to it consistently. And that can be hard as well, right? Because you might think that you are an expert in a certain field and you've got a couple of really, fire blog posts in the chamber. And once you get those out, you're like, what do I say now? And so this reminds me of something when I worked at Quora. And Quora, if you don't know, like they have a reputation of being like one of the most data-driven places. Lots of introverts, like a huge ML AI team before it was cool. But we were, as Quora employees, encouraged to write on the product as much as possible, right? And so we systematized this, and we had like a little rule for ourselves where if you were ever asked the same question 3 times, just drop what you're doing and go answer that question on Quora.
With data.
Right. So like that's like a kind of a systematized way where you don't have to overthink it. Like, oh, is this a question worthwhile answering? Is this a blog post I should write? It's just sort of like, oh,
I love that way of thinking about it. A lot of my blog posts are, I'm tired of repeating myself. And I just
exactly.
From the software engineers of DRY, don't repeat yourself, which is like, God, I'm just repeating something I said 3 weeks ago. I'd rather just send them the blog post link.
That's right. And so if you're somebody who's sort of lacking that confidence, it's like, well, if somebody asked you the same question 3 times, they must think of you as the authority on that domain. So that should give you the confidence to say like, yeah, I am qualified to write about this, and people do want to know what I think.
Okay, I love that. And then we'll ask another question, which has to do with tech as a particular context, but I think it's more general is, there are all these stereotypes of what people are like in different roles. There's this joke about engineers of how do you tell the difference between an extroverted engineer and an introverted engineer? Is an extroverted engineer looks at your shoes when they talk to you. And I guess what I'm curious about is, having worked in a variety of different contexts, and you worked outside of tech, which is rare for people in tech before that. What do you think that the styles of branding, personality, methods of communication, do they vary a lot by roles? Like, are data scientists actually more introverted, where there is a possibility that they should be considering different kinds of marketing? Are health coaches more extroverted and therefore they should be considering a different platform like they seem to be on Instagram? Or is it not really like that?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Try. I mean, I'm going to save all
I would
the
say,
silly
yeah.
questions for sillier people.
That's a good one. I hadn't really thought about that, but here are some things that are coming to mind right now. And also
Yeah.
another one where like my answer maybe 5 or 10 years ago, definitely 10 years ago, would be different than it is today, which is I think that when I think back to the time where I worked at Facebook, so I worked at Facebook around 2008, and Facebook is where I met Nina, as you know,
Who is
Phenomenal Ventures. And so at Facebook, you know, it was like still there was like a little bit of the .com bust hangover. It was before sort of like Facebook became really, really Facebook. And I'd say most of the people who worked there at the time were introverted, not just in engineering or data science roles, but also in marketing. Like I'm an introvert, believe it or not. And I think you had to demonstrate that you are a systems thinker, that you can present information, you know, very logically, like you can, you know, basically speak the same language in a place that is very dominated by product leaders, right, and people who are data driven. And so I would say that at the time I would have answered and nodded my head pretty vigorously, yes. Like I'd say everybody opted in. But then, you know, and this is my own theory, I'm thinking out loud here, but like, I think as Facebook went public and then there was a lot of excitement around tech, right? And then you got like a lot more money coming into the private sector and funding a lot of like, you know, new entrepreneurs and sort of like the boom that we saw many years after that, you attracted a larger audience of people who wanted to work in tech, who wanted to start companies, who frankly wanted to be software engineers. So maybe
right,
like,
I mean, like tech bros weren't a thing until
well, those tech bros, they might have been finance bros, right? Like, so
right.
if they were in high school and they were
right.
like,
The only frats they came from were MIT frats, which really doesn't count.
So I would say that now it's probably more of a mix, and I wouldn't say the stereotype is as strong. But I do think that there are tracks for people where, like, you know, if you're really a people person in the workplace, you know, maybe you're going to be better at people management, right? And that's like the track that you get.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do that, you can opt out and can stay a really impactful individual contributor.
Yeah, I mean, what it brings up for me is, first of all, I totally agree with that. You know, as tech became, you know, after the Social Network movie, et cetera, you know, I think a bunch of people did, it broadened the range of personalities. And also as founders, as VCs in the tech world started to reward blustery founders, you got more bluster, you know? One of the things I've learned is how the very simple labels of like introvert and extrovert just, I think, are not that helpful to me. Like I think about it more like a graphic equalizer of lots of different settings. If people remember like those on the old stereos, I'm dating myself, but like for example, I learned for myself, I'm a classic extrovert in the sense that like at a party, I'm very happy to talk to lots of people, but I also get exhausted by it. And then I go sit in the corner, which is supposed to make me an introvert. I don't know what that means, but that's just who I am. I was very reluctant to be posting in public. I didn't start a blog till I think like 2012. I had Twitter in like 2007, I think, but I didn't unlock it. It was private, which is like not a thing the same way it is on Instagram for 5 years or something like that, 4 years, not because I'm an introvert, but because I just was afraid of talking in public and not knowing how to do it or not knowing how it would affect me or something like that. Even now, by the way, like I have to type notes in order to remember the value in anything anybody said. And so it's just this weird amalgam of incoming and outgoing information that we process as individuals. And one of the ways, at least for me, and I guess I'm curious how you think about this, is what the role of trial and error is I just tried different platforms and then I learned which ones I like and which ones I don't like. Like I'm not a Substacker who's like sending out a newsletter every 2 days. That's just not who I am. Or maybe it's not. In trial and error, I discovered that that's not the method I prefer to use to engage. And I often tell people, you'll never be consistent about something you don't like.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I think just to mirror back what you said, like I'm the opposite of you. I am an introvert, but I'm always finding myself in these roles where there's this very heavy expectation that I am extroverted. So I will, you know, play the part and I'll try to look the part and do the things, but I'm exhausted and it takes me a while to recharge. Which is why, you know, similar to you, like I will try many things. And so my Twitter history is similar. Now, remember, I was a Facebook employee for a long time. So like posting on Twitter was
shame.
Exactly. So, but I would, and I had a Twitter account when you did as well. And so I would try different things. And, when a tweet takes off, you get a lot of followers, right? And so it's funny, like I don't have a ton of followers, but like the followers, the times where I got like the bump, it was from something random that I had tweeted that went super viral. And so
Yeah.
I'm known for that thing, right? And then sometimes I
Yeah.
feel better, like, I'm going to go off script, or I'm going to go not meet the
Why is it that the blog post that people most know me for is about how to write a forward intro email? There are like 2 or 3 other blog posts in tech that are virtually identical. It's random. It's random. And so what I hear from you as the themes is pick a thing to be known for that is authentically you, that might relate to your personality. Pick a medium that is relevant to the timing of the moment. For you, this moment is about writing, given work from home and all that, but that may be different in non-knowledge work occupations or something like that. Pick do some trial and error on it to discover kind of just the fabric of what happens to work for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, everything you just said, I think the thread between all of them is you have to be authentically you, because
self-knowledge goes a long way.
It'll be exhausting to keep up the act, right? And you want to be doing it all the time. And so the only way, you consistently keep at it is if it's comfortable and it's easy. And also, like, every action that you do, so every effort that you put towards this, you're building a brand, you're building a track record. So you want that to all count for something, right? You want to get credit for that. So I think that's another reason to sort of.
Well, at some point you can help me figure out mine. For now, any parting thoughts before we wrap?
No, thanks for having me. This was fun.
That was awesome. I really appreciate that. And for those of you who are watching for the first time, the reason we say this is not advice is because we don't know what you should be doing exactly in your circumstance. We're sharing our perspectives that come from a very particular thing. Advice is usually trying to justify the advice of the giver as opposed to being about the receiver. And so this is fodder for you to learn, fodder for you to learn. Let's go Buffalo. All right.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Helen.
Take care.
Continued.